Hey there, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think my computer's volume is low.
Okay, I might go get headphones as well. Let me go run and do that. How's it going?
It's going great. How about you?
I'm doing good.
Good. Um, I or I'll wait till you got your headphones sorted.
Sorry I'm late. I had to update Zoom, of course.
Classic.
Oh,
It's no problem.
here we go. Can you hear me good?
Yes. Beautiful. Okay. A
Great.
few things. Um, First of all, you might notice that it says that it's live streaming.
Mhm.
It's live streaming to an unlisted link. So, Camilo is making sure that the stream is visible, but I'm gonna cut it to the beginning of your talk
Okay, sounds good.
afterwards, and we can check in about when to make it public, if ever. But that's just so that we have it on our YouTube stored in the
Perfect.
cloud. I am going to begin by introducing the Center for Book Arts, the Research Fellowship, and then you by reading your bio.
Okay, sounds good.
Um, and then I'm going to hand it off to you. Um, you do your thing. Um, and then do you want to have any like open the floor for questions at any point?
Yeah, I think at the end we can do questions.
Okay, super.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna talk for the whole hour. I was planning in question time, so
Perfect. Okay, amazing. Oh, it's gonna be so excited. Um,
I'm excited. I'm nervous, but I'm excited.
oh, it's gonna be great.
Yes.
Um, and is there anything else that we need to worry about? Do you have any more questions? Everything's sounding
Um,
good and everything, so
okay, great. I want to do a screen share
great.
test real quick.
Great.
Um, Share my screen, slideshow mode. Okay,
Looks good.
good. Okay, let's see if clicking through, clicking through.
Great.
You see all this?
Yep, it's
Awesome.
it's all clear. And from my end, because you're pinned, I can see your teeny tiny little webcam face on the side and then big slideshow. So
Okay,
pretty
perfect.
perfect.
Great, great, great.
Sick.
So I have my notes up. Um, okay, give me one more second. I want to make sure
No
I'm
problem.
logged in to Wiki Data,
Oh,
so I
smart.
don't have to do that midstream.
Really smart. Cool.
I am logged in. Awesome. Okay,
It'd be
okay.
so great.
All right, give me just one more minute.
No, no,
Just
no.
to,
No. We can start literally. It's no rush. I'm just here, and let me know when you think you're ready.
okay, great. Gotta grab my water bottle. That's okay.
Cool. Definitely important. Hmm.
Okay, I'm ready.
Ready
Let's
to
do
go?
it.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna admit everybody Welcome all. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I see that almost everybody is muted. I will ask that everybody stays muted for the duration of the talk. And great. Cool. I think we'll wait for another minute or so for a couple more folks to trickle in. We'll just stay here in this Zoom space together. Happy Monday. There's one person who's like stuck in the waiting room. There we go. Cool, cool, cool. For those who just joined, we're just waiting a few more minutes, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes for anyone who's running a little late to get in and for me to admit them, and then we're gonna get started. How exciting. Welcome, everybody. Okay, great. Well, it's 1:05, and I have a little bit up front to say before we get to the main event. So I will begin. Hi, everybody. My name is Jillian Lee. I'm the librarian at Center for Book Arts. For those who haven't visited, we are on 27th Street. We just had some shows open. I encourage you to come by. Center for Book Arts is the oldest nonprofit dedicated to the art of the book. We were founded 50 years ago in 1974, and we're very happy to be celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. As librarian, I get to work in the collections here at Center for Book Arts, and a part of that is working with the Book Arts Research Fellows. The Book Art Research Fellowship is a program that launched in 2020 with the support of the Pine Tree Foundation. And through the Book Art Research Fellowship, 2 fellows every year come to Center for Book Arts, work with the collections, that's the reference collection, the fine art collection, and the archive. And starting with a project proposal that evolves through the research process, we get to work together to really make something amazing. And I love working with the research fellows. Nic Caldwell was a 2023 Book Art Research Fellow. And the program that we'll see today is one of the products of that research period. Now I'll introduce Nic. Nic Caldwell is a memory worker, a scholar, and a printmaker invested in making museums and libraries more accessible to marginalized communities. His approach to memory work is to challenge the boundaries of who has access to knowledge, who creates history, and whose stories get to be told. Born and raised on the south side of Chicago, Nic is currently located in New York City, where he recently created the exhibition Gwendolyn Brooks, A Poet's Work in Community at the Morgan Library and Museum. Nic is a 2021 graduate of New York University with a master's in library and information science and a master's in English literature, concentrating in special collections and African American literature. And Nic is a 2023 Book Art Research Fellow. So, without further ado, I will mute myself and pass it off to Nic. And I'm so excited to hear this talk. So thank you, Nic, and thank you, everybody. I'll be admitting people from the waiting room as the talk goes on. So thanks, everybody.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nic Caldwell. Pronouns he, they, either is fine. Thank you so much, Jillian, for that great introduction. I'm really excited to have you all here and to talk more about the research that I was doing last year at the Center for Book Arts. So I'm going to share my screen for you all. Oh, hopefully y'all can see that. Great. So this talk is called Build Your Books, and it focuses specifically on early Black book artists exhibitions. So when I began my fellowship at the Center for Book Arts, my goal was to create a Black artist book canon, a kind of a research guide for anyone interested in studying Black artists who make artist books. And I wanted to start off talking about my research methodology because I think it's important to talk about my stakes in this project. So as Jillian said, I'm a library worker and a memory worker. I primarily work with print objects created by and for the Black community. My research methods are Black bibliography, which include 5 main facets. The first, that the Black in Black bibliography is a polyvalent term, meaning that we're talking very diasporic. There's many different connections that can be made through the lens of Blackness. The second is that Black bibliography encompasses more than books. So specifically working on this project, I focused on art objects, all kinds of things that were outside of the book genre specifically. Black bibliography transverses disciplines. It's openly and proactively political. And finally, it embraces indeterminacy, which I think is really helpful, especially for research projects in this field where the answers are not always known. Sometimes you'll dig in and the silences do stop you from finding what you want to find in the archive. So just keeping all of these things in mind as I talk about this project. So as someone who studies Black books and Black material history, coming into the art book field was very interesting to me, specifically because there are so many amazing and interesting book and diverse bookworks created by Black creators throughout time. And something that I found researching into kind of the book art canon is that a lot of these works aren't really brought up and aren't really mentioned. And conversely, when reading and researching about Black bookworks throughout history, the kind of the phrase or the genre of book art is not really brought up. From this kind of like multidisciplinary research paths, I found that I really want to see the overlap. Like, how do we connect book art history with the history of Black material culture in a more direct way? So I wanted to give some examples of some of the objects that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking about bookworks by Black creators that I think seem to fall into the aspect of book art. So the first is this friendship album compiled by Amy Matilda from 1833 to 1856. These are really interesting works. A lot of them can be found on the Library Company of Philadelphia's archive, but these volumes were books and pages that were passed around through friends, and most of the friends were organizers of the anti-slavery movement, including Frederick Douglass. So through these pages, it includes transcribed poems, prose, essays, watercolors, pencil sketches. They're really interesting objects, and the subjects range from the abolition of slavery to general things like love and friendship, to what is considered like beautiful, what is considered worthwhile, and also things like motherhood, mortality, death, just things that people would write about, thinking about in their community. So these are really community oriented objects. And when you look at the books, they really do give the feel of book art, even if that wasn't the intention, even if it was more of like a conversation between friends, it really gives that feel of a volume. The next example is the kind of amazing publishing that was happening in the 1960s and 70s in the Black arts movement. So on the screen is an example of a small book called Let's Go Somewhere by the poet Jahari Amini. And as you can see, the cover is not something that you would expect from a more mainstream publication. It's very colorful. It focuses on Afrocentric design, which during that time was something that was really important for Black people to reclaim in their community. And even looking inside the books, they're published, and the lettering is very interesting. The wording, the phrasing, as exemplified by this dedication page on the right, which kind of speaks to the rhythm of these books. The books were inspired by spoken word. They were inspired by street art. They were inspired by conversations in the community. And a lot of the books published by Black printers at this time, like Third World Press and Broadside Press, were known for their collaborative book designs that include artists, photographers, graphic designers. Their focus on Black creators specifically, and the unique and political designs. Some books fold out and become posters, political posters that you can hang out. Some books include found objects like mirrors or shells. And looking at these publications, it's hard for me to well, it's just interesting to me that these books aren't included in what most mainstream people would think of as book art. So I wanted to kind of think about why that is, and how these all of these people working in book creation kind of had diverging communities, diverging critical paths currently. Um, so one of the things one of the reasons I think of this divergent is came to be was because the amorphous nature of the book art genre. The book art of an artist book can be any number of objects, so it's really hard to define and describe. So when you're talking about a canon of artist books, it's difficult to nail down what are you even really trying to talk about, and how are you trying to talk about the inspiration from one object to another. There are like countless resources in the Center for Book Arts collections trying to define what an artist book is. And this is just one that I selected because I thought it was really interesting and spoke to this amorphous nature that I'm speaking of. This is an exhibition catalog from an exhibition held at the Hermitage Foundation. And one of the main points of the exhibition was to say that an artist book can be a number of different things, and here are all the different things that it can be. So I really am interested in this page that gives often kind of divergent or contrasting ideas of what an artist book is. Artist book to me, all words, all images, or a combination thereof, or an object which is none of the above. It can be mass produced or a unique object. It can be pages from a copier machine arranged in order, or a random sequence stapled together. It can be a hand-tooled leather-bound work printed on handmade paper and illustrated with magnificent visual images. It can be exciting and original and in varied formats. And I just think this speaks to, again, like an artist book can really be anything and everything. And when we broaden it to that definition, that means that I think there's a lot of room for a canon of Black artist books. Another reason why I think that these works are kind of like in a divergent canon is, of course, because of the kind of historical exclusion of Black representation in the history of art. This stream of thought led me to an essay by Charlie Gleek called "Centuries of Black Artist Books." Gleek talks about this historical exclusion, and he advises that part of it is because there hasn't been enough critical attention given to trying to create a canon of Black artist books. There hasn't been a lot of labor put into bringing these artists into the canon of artist books. He advises that we must develop signposts and reflective tools which can point towards scholarly approaches that address the form for all its richness and complexity, which I completely agree with. He also brings up the examples of the friendship books and Black arts publishing as things that might count as artist books, but often aren't in the canon. The title of this essay, Centuries of Black Artist Books, is obviously a clear response to Johanna Drucker's 1995 study, The Century of Artist Books, which is highly cited. It's one of the most invaluable resources that we have in the history of artist books. Yet it only features a handful of works by Black artists and none before 1980. So here in this 1995 study, we can see the exclusion that's happening and how canons are created when a big study comes out and you only have a handful of Black artists included. That's how our memory of those creators are kind of lost, taken out of the historical canon. In my first visit to CBA in preparation for my fellowship topic, I actually found a really interesting book and a few interesting articles inside this book called Talking the Boundless Book, Art, Language, and the Book Arts, which is actually a compilation of essays from a conference that happened at the Minnesota Center for Book Arts in 1995. So this 1995 volume of essays has an essay by Johanna Drucker and also has an essay by Amos Paul Kennedy Jr., one of the most kind of well-known Black printers and Black book artists, print artists of the time. So I found it really interesting that in the same year that Drucker publishes Centuries of Artist Books, there's also another conversation happening in parallel to her conversation that includes Black artists, Black artists are at the table somewhere, even though they aren't really being included in these big canonical texts. In this book, I found the essay by Amos Paul Kennedy Jr. very helpful. He is really speaking to the importance of community and the importance of culture in printmaking, and the importance of being Black and printing. He says in this essay, Social Book Building, whatever I print, because my work is dedicated to the documentation of Negro culture, whatever I print is political. Which is very interesting. It's really delving into what it means to be Black during that time, what it means to be a Black artist and printmaker. And he's saying that whatever he prints is inherently political, and it is always speaking to his community. And I think that's exemplified in this little book that's in the Center for Book Arts collection called The Nappy Book, which is this small, you see my hand for scale, this small book that has a really inflammatory slogan and also a kind of racist caricature on the front. And you go inside and you're like, I have to know what this is about. And it also is accompanied by a web address, which goes to Kennedy Jr.'s website talking about his political activism and ideas. So I think this little book really exemplifies the kind of social book creation he's talking about. Not only is he engaging his audience, really bringing in who exactly he's talking to, he's also linking out and being like, if you want to be involved, there's also this web space where you can be active. So I thought that was a really great, looking at this object and then reading his essay was a really great comparison. In the same essay, he speaks directly to artists of color and basically tells them, you need to make the work that's important to you and your community. He says, when you build your books, remember that there's a public out there much larger than the 5,622 collectors, book artists, and public libraries in America. Address your books to the rest of the community. So he's really talking about making art for the people, and he's talking to the artists of color in the crowd, and so it really made me think, where what did this community of artists look like? What was the foundation that they were building their books on? What were the foundations, and what were the other examples of the work that they could do with books, and in the community? Another really helpful guide in thinking through this project and kind of the reclamation of book art, for Black artists, was reading Past Futures and Aftermaths by Adam Pendleton. Um, this is his a sequel to his first Black Dada reader, which came out in 2017, and includes more work and also interviews at the end. And Dadaism, as many know, was an art movement formed during the First World War. It emphasized the nonsensical and satirical, and was largely prompted by like negative reactions and the horrors happening during the war. And Dadaism is also often cited as one of the first progenitors of the book art movement, even though it of course isn't the only. It is definitely seen on the timeline of book art as a genre. But similar to the history of book art, the history of Dadaism has often overlooked the contributions and the cultural material history of Blackness. As I'm working on to do a retroactive reclamation of the book art genre for Black artists, Pendleton does this work with the genre of Dadaism. This book, Past Futures and Aftermaths, is a great resource and reader that helps create a stream of what Dadaist ideas look like in the Black social imaginary. It includes works from activists like Angela Davis and Malcolm X. There is like Sarah Ahmed, but it also includes essays on things that you might not expect, like essays on jazz and essays on exhaustion. In the book, Pendleton also uses strategies like obscuring and mediating the text, as you can see on these pages. And I really think this technique of blending genres, political theory, music theory, theories of the novel and writing, but also theories of exhaustion, overwork, capitalism, provides a very generative study on what Black Dadaist thought might look like. It speaks to the same kind of satire and nonsensical nature that people were responding to in the first Dada movement of the World War. And yeah, this was a really helpful guide on knowing what to look for when trying to create a canon of Black artist books. Something else that was really generative to the project was my work at the Morgan Library, which was my first interaction with this book, the Black Book, which was compiled by Toni Morrison in 1974 and published by Random House. This book is a really interesting object. It's a collage-like book that explores the history and experiences of African Americans in the United States through historic documents, facsimiles, artwork, obituaries, advertisements, patent applications, photographs, sheet music, and more. Talks about different objects created by Black people, objects created to contain and torture and constrain Black people, but also photos of Black life. And further, like what brought this book even further to my attention was the 22 exhibition curated by Hilton Alls that spotlighted the works that Morrison brings in the Black Book. So he really used the exhibition space to show all of these different objects, items, and artworks that were shown in the Black Book, and kind of gives a physicality to what Morrison was trying to do. He notes Morrison wanted the largely visual work to be a kind of scrapbook or panorama of Black life, largely free of language, and thus can't, and valuable to young. He quotes Morrison here. I was afraid that young people would come to believe that Black history began in 1964, or that there was slavery, there was a gap, and then there was 1964. So she really had this anxiety about young people not knowing that there was more to Black history than just the present and slavery. It really was interesting to see this exhibition and see in more detail what Morrison might have meant and what she was talking about when she created the Black Book, which again doesn't have any text from her. That's kind of presented without comment, and so that's really interesting. Um, I think both the exhibition and the Black Book itself show a Black historical impulse to document using the expressive form of the book as not only a piece of writing, but also a piece of art, a piece of documentation, a piece of witness. Um, yes, and it also led me to looking more into exhibition as a way of figuring out what Black artists were thinking in these more contemporary times. So that leads me to what a lot of my research at the Center for Book Arts was about, which was the exhibitions themselves. I wanted to look at exhibitions that were really early in the kind of creation of book art as a genre. So that's we'll say canonically around the mid 70s. And so I wanted to look at exhibitions as close to that as possible to see what people of color were doing at this kind of like generative time where this is becoming a genre that people can understand, that people are critically receiving, that people want to create and speak to. So the first exhibition I found in my research was called Dialects, Diverse Bookworks by Black and Hispanic Artists. It opened in January 1980. I haven't yet found the closing date. It was at Franklin Furnace in New York City and was created by historian and art historian Horace Brockington. So Dialects, as you can tell by the name, was really about conversation. There's a lot, there are archival materials that speak to what the exhibition's point was, what it really wanted to do. The point was for Black and brown artists to explore the book form and see what that could do for their work. So here, reading this press release, it says that Dialects was originated with the express interest of exploring minority artists' involvement with the book format. It attempts to explore the changes in artistic vocabulary on the part of the artists as the transference in medium occurs from their primary medium to the book format. So in this exhibition, we see a lot of experimental works, which is very interesting to see what these artists of color do with the goal of making book art. But it didn't come without difficulties. And I'm really interested in the difficulties that came up during the exhibition. Brockington notes that this exhibition came about through much research and much time from a large diversity and range of sources. He also mentions that many artists invited to participate have been omitted due to hectic schedules and the unavailability of specific works. And I think you can kind of see that in this checklist of the exhibition where we see here that one of the works was completely struck through. I assume from lack of availability, but it's interesting to see that with the large the goal that he still had trouble reaching it because some of the artists were just unavailable or omitted or didn't have time or couldn't contribute the resources to be involved in the project. So the project ends up being 30 artists of diverse works, but this makes me imagine what work was omitted and who was not part of the conversation, even though the works that are there are really interesting. So the themes of the exhibition were exploring the politics of race, gender, and identity through bookmaking practices. It brought together artists of color working outside of book art. So it wasn't just book artists, but also artists working in a variety of mediums to create an artist book. The works vary in style, and they reflect a lot of the artist's primary mediums, such as performance, sculpture, photography, music, and collage. The artists use a range of materials. They created printed, handmade, painted, audio, handwritten, silk screened, hole punch, and sculptural books. So That's a large range of materials. As you can see, these are archival photographs from the 1980s, and unfortunately, the quality isn't the best, which is making it really hard to identify the actual works that are in the exhibition. So I have the checklist and I have these images, but it's really hard to determine which objects are which. And a lot of the objects are no longer held in museums or archives. So part of the future work of this project is figuring out trying to track down the specific works that were in this exhibition. Yeah, I also thought the timing of this exhibition was really interesting and needed. It really shows that artists of color are doing amazing and experimental things, even though they had limited opportunities in the mainstream art world. And another detail from the exhibition is that it also included an evening of music of visual music from John Dowell, which was like an abstract kind of musical technique inspired by jazz with avant-garde compositions. So in addition to the actual books themselves, there's also this community of experimental artists that are coming together to say something about their work and why it's important. The second exhibition, this is one of the works from the exhibition that I was able to track down. And it was actually displayed last year at Center for Book Arts show. It's called it's one by Reginald Walker, who is one of the artists that was actually a book artist in the show. So his main medium was actually books, and it's rubber stamps on Coptic binding, and you can see these interesting kind of codices, these stamps that seem to maybe create some sort of language. You can see words, but also some things that don't seem to be words. Um, and Walker's work is really interesting to me because it focuses on African symbology and also Coptic codices. In his artist statement, he stated his work represents the ancient African book functioning as an icon and art object. So even in his like creation of this work, he is talking about how it is a spiritual talisman, but it is also an art object. And I think that duality speaks to the type of work that was going into the show and the type of work that Black artists were doing in this time. The second exhibition that I researched in my time during my fellowship was Coast to Coast, a Women of Color National Book Artist Project. This exhibition was a traveling exhibition that happened between January 15th, 1989 and September 22nd, 1990. It was actually organized earlier in 1987 and curated by Clarissa Sly, Faith Ringgold, and Margaret Gallegos. Um, the goal of the exhibition was to basically show the exceptional talent of women of color artists. In addition, it provided an opportunity for women to collaborate and again create dialogue. The exhibition was also accompanied by panels and speeches by these women artists, which I can only imagine how great those were. The first exhibition ended up being over 200 artists from over 30 states that were represented. The artist statement says that it included Hispanic, Native American, Middle Eastern, Far Eastern, and African American women. So in the collection of the Center for Book Arts is this great collection catalog that not only includes images of many of the works that were in the exhibition, but it also includes a list of all of their names. So this has been really helpful for my research, trying to track down Black artists that were working in this early time, the 70s and 80s, creating book art. And again, this was a very multi kind of medial exhibition. Artists used audio tapes, leather, quilts, gourd skin, pulp paper, photographs, boxes, bags, kind of everything that could be considered an art object was included, which I think was really cool. And this is actually the list of artists for the exhibition that happened at the Center for Book Arts, which I think is really awesome to see. To imagine, to go to the Center for Book Arts, imagine this exhibition in the space. It's probably a really amazing feat. But it also didn't come without some issues or challenges. So the Coast to Coast project was actually the second rendition of this project. Actually, in 1987, what the original goal was to gather women together to make audio and video kind of oral histories about their work and about their lives. So in February of 1987, a group of women gathered at the home of Julia Hutton in New York City, and the participants were videotaped with the idea of producing some sort of video documentation. Unfortunately, the videos were lost to an editor. So because of technical failings, all of those interviews were lost. And in that spring is when the book project was initiated and participation was elicited for women to create artist books. So I think this speaks to me to the physical nature of books, the physical nature of objects as a way to document. The fact that the project originally started as something more concrete, like we're going to film these women talking about their lives. And it transformed into, we're going to see what these women can tell us about their lives through the book form, was really amazing. So one of the works in the exhibition, this is one by Clarissa Sly, one of the curators, well-known book artist, called What's Happening with Mama. And as you can see, it's a series of texts and photographs juxtapositioned versus negative photographs on the back, and it folds into this interesting home-shaped object. And Sly in her artist statement says that she wanted to use the medium of photograph to connect what has already happened to a kind of continual present by juxtaposing the photographs in order to construct the unsayable. So just what she's doing in her work is, it kind of speaks to the book object as being able to do something that maybe nothing else can. Like the photographs are not enough, the writing is not enough. There's something about them being together in this form that can speak to the unsayable. And yeah, I just think that was a really interesting way to construct what a book object can do. So as we can see that there were a lot of varied inspirations and different preoccupations, different challenges, and different inspirations for Black book artists. So this kind of represents my own challenge as a memory worker and researcher, as how do we tell these stories that are often disjointed and fractured or improvisational, jazz-like? How can we construct this in a more straightforward way? In a way that increases their discovery and use, and encourages researchers to make these connections and guide us towards a canon of Black book artistry. One strategy that's been used in the arts field for quite some time is linked data methods. And I use this in my work at the New York Public Library, and have used this in my work in the past to make connections between artists more apparent and accessible to someone who's just Googling. You shouldn't have to like dig as deep as I had to find these connections, especially since they're so fruitful for, I think, future creation. So one leak data strategy that I have been using has been Wikidata. Wikidata is really helpful because it is, if you don't know what Wikidata is, it's kind of like a central storage for the data behind Wikipedia. And I think Wikipedia is a really accessible tool. It's easy to find. Anyone can use it if they have Google and access to the internet. It's collaborative, and Wikidata kind of helps fuel that. Those back-end connections. So when you click a link in Wikipedia, it leads you to the person or thing that you are trying to find. So one thing that I was able to do for this project is create Wikidata items for some of the lesser known or unknown artists that I were studying in the exhibition. So I'm going to try to take us to Wikidata now, just to take a look at the kind of information that we can store and the kind of connections that we can make through these linked data strategies. So this is the Wikidata item I created for Reginald Walker. Reggie Walker, he was the one working in Codices, the book that I showed you earlier in the day. And he didn't have Wikipedia, a Wikidata item. When I was researching him, it was really hard to find information that really connected him to his work and to the greater internet. So I created this item, and you can see that I was able to put his full name as well as his nickname, his description of his field, so people know that he is someone that works in the book arts, and yeah, connects anything that I knew about him, like his place of birth, and where he was educated, and especially where his archives are at. So his archives are actually held at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture in Harlem. So I was able to connect the actual finding aid for his collection through Wikidata. So now anyone that comes to this page looking for information about Reginald Walker is going to be able to find not only this brief information, but also where to find more about him. And as well, you can create Wikidata items for a number of things, not only people, but also exhibitions, which can be really helpful. And I'll show you that now. So I was able to create a Wikidata item for dialects, which didn't have one. And I was able to put information like where it was held and when, and also able to create a list of all of the artists that were exhibited at the exhibition. So if you come to this exhibition page, you can see all of the creators whose work can be found in the exhibition. And if you click on one of these, it will take you to that artist page, so you can learn more about them. So now I can learn more about Mallory Ryder, and kind of make more connections between what did these artists have in common, what were they all working on, what were their original fields, what were their original mediums, and how did they get involved in this project. And we can create kind of knowledge graphs and information based off of that. So the next steps for this project are to further study the works from these historical exhibitions. Like I said, it's hard comparing an archival photo to an actual collection and trying to find an object that was displayed 40 years ago. So I want to look more into trying to track those down and actually see more of the material. And also going forward, creating more Wikidata items for other artists that are not represented in Wikidata, so that we can make these rich linked data connections. And for our artists that are already in Wikidata, improve linked data records to add things that are maybe mentioned in their artist biography and artist statement to just further help enhance and tell the story of what they were working on, tell a fuller story of what they were inspired by, the places that really contributed to their work as an artist, in the communities that they were speaking to as they were building their books. And the last step is to kind of use these links to again create a more whole idea and atmosphere around Black book artists, to create a guide of, if you want to learn about Black book artists, this is where they were exhibiting, this is where they were writing, this is where they were gathering, and how those stories can help us understand more about the work that they were creating. This is just a page I wanted to put for further reading of anyone who's interested in more general topics in Black bibliography, and also in linked data. So I would suggest checking out these links to just learn more about why this work is important and the other people that are doing this work. Finally, I want to say thank you. Thank you so much to the Center for Book Arts for allowing me access to their amazing collections. Thank you so much, Jillian, for your hard work with the collections. Thank you all for being here. And yeah, if you need to contact me, there's my Twitter and my email. I welcome questions. What I love about this work is, again, how communal it is. Every time I talk to people about the work, I get new questions and ideas. And since this research is still in like a proto phase, I really am open to any suggestions. Is there any like good trails that you think the research should go down, or any suggestions? My ears are open and my inbox is open. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nick. That was really great. I think we have some time for audience questions if there are any. Nick, does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Cool. Does anybody have any questions who's here with us? I'm looking for raised Zoom hands. Oh, we have one in the chat. How can those of us who work with book arts and in art libraries help with your further work? That's from Anne Evanhowen. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but thank you, Anne. Nick, how can those of us who work in art libraries help?
Thank you so much. So I think as a librarian myself, I'm thinking what a lot of the important work that we do is making sure that the information is accessible in general. And a lot of collections, works by Black artists are miscategorized, miscatalogued, don't have resources put towards them. And this is not only in our present, but it's a historical issue. So if the collection was brought in the early 80s, 70s, or 80s, and no one has touched it since then, or no one has had the skills to really speak to how this information is important, that can be difficult. So I would say critical cataloging practices, really thinking about if you have these collections, how they're being used by resources, if they are being used by researchers, making sure that the communities that these collections belong to know that you hold the collections. I think just speaking more broadly about these collections is helpful to me, but also helpful to our community. And I also love a research guide. If you want to get involved in Wikidata, there's many Wikidata projects that different libraries do. I would recommend looking at one of the resources that I listed, which is Black Lunch Table, which is a Wikidata project specifically about making Wikidata items for Black artists. And they have a list of artists that who need Wikidata items, who need improvement and enhancement in their Wikidata items. And if you work at an art library and you have those resources and you're looking at a source that you can cite, that's really helpful. So yeah.
Awesome. We've got a few more questions in the chat, so I'm just gonna go down the line. Karina Reynolds, hey, asks, I'm curious to hear if any work has been done that you know of about Black phone book makers. Do you know about? I have not heard of
I
phone
haven't, but that
book
sounds really
as a.
cool.
Is that Karina? Do you want to unmute? Are there like art photo book? Totally.
So I don't personally know about any. But again, I think that's part of like these worlds being so disparate and disconnected. I don't personally work in photographs specifically. So that might be something that a more photograph centered researcher or librarian would know. But again, since these items are also multi genre, it's hard to know who to go to. So I will look more into that actually. If you have any resources, I'd be happy to take a look.
Um, I wonder if 10 by 10 has any um useful resources in that area. Okay, continuing with questions. Shauna asks, you might have mentioned this, but are you planning a future exhibit on this research?
Oh, that's a good question. I would love to. There's nothing planned, but I will be writing an article for the Book Art Review, and in the future, once the work comes together more, I would be happy to do an exhibition on it. So I'll keep you updated, Jillian, and you can let everyone know.
Yeah. Um, Lowe Smith asks, what was a surprising or unexpected hole in the research materials? For example, you mentioned old photos not matching the catalogs.
That's a really good question. Just the fact that people don't take pictures as much, didn't take pictures as much back then in the 80s as they do now. So like I wasn't able to find a picture of what the Coast to Coast Women Book Artists exhibition looked like when it was up. So that's something I would really want to find. I'm sure it's in an archive somewhere, but it wasn't available online as far as I could see, and there was none in CBA's resources. So that's really interesting when doing historical research. Is like I don't have firsthand accounts of like I can't speak to the space or speak to the people that were there. Also, because I mentioned that the Coast to Coast exhibition had over 200 artists. Um, so some of those people were just named Joanne Brown. And so it was hard to know who exactly the person was, especially again, since we're not as connected. People weren't as connected back then as they are now. So they just list their first and last name. And then you go to like look them up online and there's no information. Even if there's a great work, even if I could find biographical information on them through the resource itself, like even looking up like Joanne Brown, who went to Howard University, like who is that? So that was difficult, but it really emphasized the work for me is like, okay, I'm doing this work on the front end so people in the future can make these connections more readily. Thank you for that question.
That is a great question and a great answer. Thank you, Nick. Kind of relatedly, Amy Campbell asks, I'm a creative. What do you think is the best way to archive work so it isn't lost and is easily found?
That is a great question. And I am not an archivist in the art history capacity. So that's not a skill that I actually have, but I would suggest working with an archivist. There are people who offer those services. I don't have any on hand now, but there are other information workers and memory workers who are passionate about that work and passionate about making sure that people's archives are together. So yeah, I would suggest working with an archivist, reaching out to archivists. You can send me an email and I can send you some names if you tell me more specifically what your kind of materials are, what you're interested in. And yeah, I would say memory workers know best. It can be a really opaque process that you don't know until you work in the field for a while. But it is really important to, conserve our histories.
And Amy, stay tuned. I am working on compiling some resources of personal archiving for artists. Um, Moving down the line. Uh, Netta Bomani asks, have you done any research connecting Black artist books to zines? Or anything, if you want to speak on zines at all.
Yes, I love zines. I haven't that is an even more kind of amorphous genre that's even harder to track down and research wise, but that is a future direction that I want to take this project. I was looking more at historical materials because those are more well documented, and zines can be harder to kind of like track down. And if you haven't been to the Brooklyn Museum recently, there's a great exhibition on zines that everyone should check out. That really inspired me because it's all the same kind of work. It's all speaking to. It's all hyper community, hyper local materials that people are making to hand to their friend. And I think that is similar to what people were doing with artist books. In the early stages, which is like, we're going to pass this around. This is going to be a communal. We're going to create this together. And so I think there definitely are similarities. But again, the canons haven't, to this point, been intersected in a critical lens.
Great. More questions. Okay, we have two folks asking about specific artists. One person asks, are you familiar with Mike Monteiro and his colleagues' work? There's a link in the chat, Nick, if you want to check that out.
I will. I am not familiar with this person, so I will definitely check them out. Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
Person asks, Jared Ash asks, have you looked at Ruth Edwards and quote books in black unquote? Or is she a little later than what you're focusing on?
That I may have read, but would definitely give it a closer look. Yeah, thanks. Thank you again for these great resources. I will definitely take closer looks at both of these artists.
Wonderful. Um, All right. That's everything that was in the chat. If anybody has any last minute questions, there's a few minutes left in the hour. But I I think that we got to everything. Really exciting. I mean, the questions really point to just how many directions this work can continue to go in.
Absolutely. And it's so exciting because everyone is going to be to zoom in on a different aspect, which is what I hope for and what I hope this project really helps facilitate. I can't wait to see where people take these different ideas. It's a very rich field of study. Yeah.
Definitely. Great. Well, I think that that draws this hour to an end. Thank you everybody for attending. Nic, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation, and has been so great to work with you over the past year, and I look forward to continuing to do so. Um, and yeah, one more thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's so nice to come together in the middle of the day to learn and to share in research and resources. So with all that said, thank you very much, everyone.